Hello everybody and welcome to another video from Eagles of Empire Miniatures. In today's video we're going to take a closer look at the Eagles of Empire Skirmish Rules and dive into how the shooting phase works. So we're going to try to cover all the possible situations and outcomes, but should you still have questions to how a certain unit, how a certain rule or how a certain situation works, then don't be shy. Please just leave some comments below. We love to have a communication with our followers and our fellow hobbyists. For those of you not entirely familiar with the Eagles of Empire, well, it's a fast-played set of skirmish rules for the Franco-Prussian War. We have our own historical miniatures range covering the entire war. We have basing sets fits with our rule system, and we have hand-picked Franco-Prussian paint sets from the very talented producers over at Green Stuff World. So really we have all you need to get gaming with historical miniatures for the Franco-Prussian War. Right, so let's have a look at how the shooting phase of the game works. Right, so when doing the shooting phase, it's really important to differentiate between the different units in the game. So I'll just run over those quickly. You have your squad, which is the basic infantry unit. Each squad comes with its own unit card. On each squad's unit card, you will have some information that's going to help you during the shooting phase. You will have its weapons range. In this case, for the French line infantry, it's the chassepot. You will have your squad's firepower, the number of d6 dice it gets to roll when shooting. And if it's receiving fire, you will have your squad's defensive value, which is the number of dice you get to roll when you are receiving fire or you are in a hand-to-hand combat where you are the defending party. So here's a squad of French line infantry. Two squads in Eagles of Empire can be attached and forms a section. Becoming a section means that the two squads will move in the same turn and they will fire in the same turn. So in Eagles of Empire, it's a back and forward turn sequence. So your adversary gets to fire one unit, then you get to fire with one unit, back to your adversary, and then back to you, back and forth that way. It's a ping pong. So attaching two squads to form a section gives you the advantage of getting to fire both of these squads when it's your turn. Right, so having two infantry squads forming a section gives you also the advantage of having an attached officer. Officers will trigger that you get to use your faction's Doctrine card. A Doctrine card is a card that contains different ways to boost your troops' ability. It could be extra movement, extra fire. It could be a special ability like healing troops on the gaming table, and so on. Each of these activations will cost command points, but you will earn command points in the game by taking and holding tactical objectives on the table. So it's really a good way to boost your troops' performance. So when you're recruiting for the next round and you have enough command points to recruit two squads, why not build a section and add an officer? It's free to add the officer, but you get then to spend some command points on your faction's tactical Doctrine card. So when looking at shooting, it's really important to differentiate whether you are shooting as a single squad like this, or you are shooting as a section. And we're going to do some examples with both now, where the squad will be firing at another squad, a squad will be firing at a section, and a section will be firing at another section. So you can see all the different twists and turns of that. So in this first example, we're going to have a squad of Bavarian line infantry fire at a squad of French line infantry. It's pretty straightforward when a squad is firing at a squad. Of course, you have your unit card to help you along if you have any doubts, but the first thing you check is your weapons range. In this case, the Bavarians are carrying needle guns. They have a range of 18 inches. We are within range here. They have a firepower of 3d6. So we'll go ahead and place that. The French squad receiving the fire are going to look at their defensive value, which is 2d6. We'll go ahead and place those. Now, the next thing you need to observe is the unit strength. Unit strength is the built-in morale system of Eagles of Empire Skirmish Rules, and it's an easy system to follow. A unit will have a unit strength of 3, a squad of infantry here, unit strength 3, represented by the 3 bases on the table. If they start receiving casualties, you would simply remove one of the bases for each casualty they suffer. So, when you are at full unit strength of 3, you will hit and you will save at 4+. If they start to receive casualties, like this, unit strength 2, now they are at hitting and saving at 5+. Additionally, they can suffer another casualty before wiping out. Now they are down to unit strength 1, which means they would hit and save at 6+. So let's go ahead and do some examples here that are easy to follow. I'll just remove the unit cards to give you a better view. So, the Bavarians are going to roll the 3 firepower dice, looking for 4+. They get 2 hits. The French squad is going to take the fire and now roll to save. They have 2 defensive dice and they're looking for 4+, since they are also at full unit strength of 3. Horrible day for the French. They don't make any saves. They take 2 casualties. That is a basic way to resolve fire between the 2 base units of the game, the basic infantry squads. Let's move on to what happens when you are looking at something more complex, namely the sections. Right, we're back here at the same battlefield, but now the Bavarian squad is going to fire at a French section. Section consists of 2 French line infantry squads like this. Bavarian squad, has their unit card right there. So, when a squad is firing at a section, what happens is that it will direct its fire at the squad within the French section closest to it. Really obvious way to conduct the fire. So no big surprises. They measure out this squad is the closest to the Bavarian squad. So again, we'll have a quick look at the unit card. 18 inch within range, yes, check. 3d6 firepower. And the French squad is gonna defend itself with 2d6. Both squads are within range. Both squads are at full manpower, full unit strength. So they're both looking for 4+. Now, let's do a different example, because this is straightforward. They'll roll for 4+, they'll roll for 4+, and then it's over. Let's do an example that is a little more tricky. Let's say that the French squad here suffered casualty somewhere during the game. Now the Bavarians are going to fire at that squad. So the French squad still has their 2d6 defensive roll, but since they're reduced to manpower to unit strength 2, they now have 5+ to save. The Bavarians, they have a really good roll. They roll 2 5s and a 6, getting 3 hits in on the French unit. The poor French unit rolls 4 and a 2. Now normally a 4 would have been a save, but since they are reduced in unit strength to 2, they need 5+ to save, so they don't save any. So it's actually 2 casualties plus an excess casualty. We're going to do the excess casualty now so I can show that example. First of all, we remove, of course, the 2 casualties suffered. Now we have an excess casualty. Now, since this squad up here, taking the fire, taking the casualty, suffered excess casualty, that will travel down to the attached unit here. It doesn't become immediate casualty because the second unit here gets to try and dodge the fire. So they will roll looking for 4+ since they are in full unit strength, and they dodge it. Saying that example that they didn't dodge it, well, they would have suffered 1 casualty also for indirect fire. So that's how fire works. Shooting works when you're shooting from a squad into a section. Let's have a look and see what happens if you are shooting a section at a squad. Right, so let's have a look at this example. We have a Bavarian section consisting of 2 squads, here and here. And in this case they have an attached officer. At the other side we have a French squad taking fire from the Bavarian section. Now, in Eagles of Empire, if you have a section consisting of 2 squads, well, that section will get to fire as 1 unit. That does not mean that they get to roll all the fire dice at once, but it means that they get to conduct the fire in the same turn without the French getting to answer back. It works like this. First of all, we have a look at the table and see which of the 2 squads within the Bavarian section that are closest to the enemy. They will get to fire first. In this case, it's this squad. So they'll get to fire first. Again, we remember that the French will have their 2 defensive dice. If we are ever in doubt, we can look at the unit cards at hand. And each of the Bavarian squads within the section will get 3 firepower dice. So, these guys will roll first. In this example, the top Bavarian squad would have suffered a casualty beforehand in combat, and now they are rolling 5+ to hit. The bottommost squad is still rolling 4+ to hit since they are at full unit strength. So they're looking for 4s. They get 1 hit. Now the French will absorb that fire first of all before we resolve the topmost squad. So the French squad will roll 4+ to save, and they save. They neutralize the fire of the first Bavarian squad. So we move up to the second Bavarian squad, looking for 5s or 6s, and they get another hit. The French squad will defend, looking for 4s, and they don't save this one. So they will actually suffer a casualty from that fire. So that's how it works when you fire at a single squad from a section. I'll add the further notice here that if, let's say that if in the first sequence of the fire that this first squad within the Bavarian section wiped out the French unit, well then the second squad here, they can't direct the fire. Let's say there was another unit up here. Well, they can't direct their fire at this other unit. It's already been directed at this unit. It's been wiped out by the first fire sequence, so they can't direct the fire dice at another unit within range. It's still directed at this unit even though it has been wiped out. So that's how it works when you're firing from a section at a squad. So let's look at what happens when you fire section towards section. Lastly, what happens when you are firing section at a section? Well, again, let's have a look at what's actually on the table. We have 2 squads of Bavarian line infantry formed as a section, and we have 2 squads of French line infantry formed as a section. In this case, the Bavarians are going to be firing at the French. Now, to make this example more relevant for you, I'm going to add some casualties to the two sides just to see how morale can twist and turn the dice roll. So in this case, the Bavarian lower squad will have suffered 2 casualties. The French lower squad would have suffered 1 casualty beforehand. So now we're in the middle of a fight between these two sections. They are meeting at the battlefield and they've suffered some casualties beforehand, and now we're dropping into the action here. So the Bavarians are going to fire, so they're looking at their unit cards just to consult what the firepower is, and it's 3d6 per squad. So let's go ahead and place those. They get 3 dice and they get 3 dice up here. Now I'll do this visually so you can follow. The topmost squad has full unit strength, so they're looking at 4+. The bottommost squad is reduced to unit strength 1, so they're actually looking for 6+ to hit. On the French side, consulting the unit card, we'll see that each of the 2 squads will have 2d6 to defend. The bottommost squad has suffered 1 casualty, they're down to unit strength 2, so they'll be saving at 5+. Whilst the topmost squad, they're at full unit strength, so they are saving at 4+. Right, so in this case, measuring out, it's actually the bottommost squad that's closest to the enemy, so they get to roll first. Let's do the example live. They actually get 1 hit. French squad, remember 2 unit strength, so they are saving at 5+. They don't save, so they're actually now down to unit strength 1. Now, since the first rate of fire went to that unit, it's that unit that's going to take it from the second squad within the Bavarian section. So they're going to direct the fire at them again, trying to wipe them out. This might be good since it's going to give us, let's say they actually rolled a 6 here. They get 2 hits. Now, the French squad being down to unit strength 1, they still give their 2 defensive dice, but now they're down to 6s to save. They have to save 2 hits. Let's say that they actually didn't save that, because that's gonna do the interesting example here. We actually get 2 casualties, 0 saves. Now the squad can only absorb 1 casualty, so we will have an excess casualty. Again, interesting, because that will spill over to the second squad that's attached within the unit. So the unit takes the casualties coherently, and any excess casualties here will spill over to the second squad within the unit. So they can now get to roll actually, which is nice. It's indirect fire, so it's not direct casualty. But they get to roll a save, and then don't save. They would have saved at 4+, but they don't. They take a casualty, and that's how it's conducted. Fire from one full section towards another full section. Let's move on to other examples now with artillery and cavalry. Okay, so in this example we're going to look at how it works when an infantry unit is going to fire at a cavalry unit. For this example I've fielded a French line infantry squad and a Prussian cuirassier basic unit. Cavalry is in Prussian called Bérite, in French is the peloton, but it's the smallest unit of cavalry you can have. Just like the infantry, we have squad, and 2 squads will form a section. You have a Bérite or peloton of cavalry, and 2 Bérite or 2 peloton will form a squadron of cavalry. So cavalry, looking at their defensive value, this particular unit has 2d6, so we'll add that. 2d6, it's getting fired at by the French, and as we probably remember by now, French line infantry has a standard firepower of 3d6. So, assuming again that the example is within range here of the French cesspool, the Prussian unit is cavalry and it's getting fired at. And it's during the Franco-Prussian War, cavalry really took a lot of beating because it was fast getting out of date in terms of the massive firepower now of the breech loading rifles and also of the breech loading artillery. So it was really, cavalry was really obsolete or nearing obsolescence. So reflecting that in the rules, cavalry has a special rule. It is marked by this here. All unit cards have their special ability or special rules applied here. And this one means it's a large target. So that means that the French actually, when firing at this particular unit, a cavalry unit, they get an additional D6 for the fire. So the French, being at full strength, they will look at 4+ to hit. And they create 2 hits. Now, Prussian cuirassiers at full strength have 2 D6s and they'll save at 4+. They don't save either of the hits. So they actually take 2 hits, reducing their manpower to 1. So they're down to a 1 in manpower and unit strength, and that will bring the morale down to a 6+ to hit and a 6+ to save in next round. So I'm not gonna go into hand-to-hand combat, but normally they would be crashing into the French infantry next round and they would have a hand-to-hand, but there'll be a different episode on the hand-to-hand. Let's assume now that the French unit took some fire during the second round. Now they are at reduced strength. They're firing at a Prussian cuirassier unit at reduced strength. So this one is perhaps gonna challenge you a little bit, but again, the French, they have a firepower of 3d6. However, since the unit strength is down to 2, to reduce by 1, they now hit and save at 5+. They still get an additional shooting die since they're firing at a big target. The Prussian cuirassiers, they have 2 d6 defense dice and they will roll. Now they'll save and they'll hit at 5+, since they also have been reduced by 1 in unit strength. So 5+ to hit, creating 2 hits, 5+ to save, and as a reroll, 1 save and 2 hits. So in this case, the Prussian cuirassier unit will lose 1 unit strength. Remember again that units, also cavalry, will get cover if, for instance, more than half the unit is behind cover. Well, I'm not going to do the example here with woods, since I find that we often see them maybe riding past walls or buildings and so on, popping out in the open, and you take a rifle fire at them. It could have been that the unit had been perhaps behind line of sight, now popping out, but since cavalry can't move through woods, I think the most relevant example here is hardcover. But hardcover would have given them an additional 2d6. We can run the example just for the fun of it. So standard full cuirassier unit will have 2d6s defense die, but they'll get an additional 2 for hardcover. The French unit, standard squad of line infantry, full strength, would have 3d6 firing power, but would get an additional 1 since they're now firing at a large target. So it's 4 dice against 4 dice, 4+, since both units are at full strength. In this case, well, 2 hits on the French side and only 1 save on the Prussian side. So the Prussian unit, despite enjoying hard cover, would still suffer 1 casualty in this case. So Beware of that when you're fielding cavalry. Try to keep them away from rifle fire, away from artillery, if possible. I know it's not easy, but you really need to use cavalry very carefully. They are expensive. I'll give you an example here. Prussian cuirassiers, they will cost you 6 command points to recruit. They do have a lot of hitting power if you get them into hand-to-hand combat, or you can wipe out enemy light cavalry pretty easy, but they're still very vulnerable to receiving fire in the shooting phase. Right, so that concludes the example for cavalry, and we'll now jump over to looking a little bit at artillery. So now we're moving on to artillery. Again, focusing on shooting. In this case, we're going to have a French 4-pounder Système Light. You're going to be firing at a Bavarian squad of line infantry. So how does that work? Well, let's have a look at the unit card. It's going to tell you everything you need to know about the artillery unit. So it has a range of 48 inches. That's going to cover a good portion of the gaming table. Beware that the Prussian Krupp gun, the breech loading, Prussian Krupp guns will have a slightly longer range. So when it comes to the artillery, the Prussian side has the range advantage. Firepower, well, 1d6. Okay, let's find 1d6 here for the French. And it has a special ability called artillery. That means that when it hits, you can't save it. It's a shell, it's a artillery shell, dropping down in the unit. It's gonna wipe out whoever gets it in the face. So there's really no point of rolling to save here. It's a certain kill. However, you need 6+ to get a hit. So that's the basics of artillery. And it goes without saying that even if the Bavarian unit would have been in light cover, enjoying a extra defensive dice, they would still get a casualty, lose a manpower if the French gun would have rolled a 6+. Again, also, even if they are in hard cover, have to have line of sight, of course. Even if they are in hard cover, having 2d6 extra defense dice, well, it still is a full unsavable casualty that they suffer if the French gun will roll a 6. I think it's interesting also to look at the French super weapon of the Franco-Prussian War, the mitrailleuse. Right, so this particular early machine gun was developed in the late 1850s and 1860s, and it was developed in the greatest secrecy by the French military engineer. So the French really didn't know exactly how to use it tactically during the war, so it was often fielded together with the artillery, which was a bit of a shame. Because it had massive potential capacity to inflict casualty if used at infantry, enemy infantry. So looking at the range here, let's get a mitrailleuse on the table. I have this model here, based a bit of a street fighting scenario here, vignette style, but inspired by the many skirmishes and small battles in the towns of the Loire campaign during the late phase of the war, during the autumn. But this is the mitrailleuse model. We'll have that here. So a mitrailleuse, well, it's the same thing as with the normal artillery. It is a 1d6 firepower, but it has a special ability called a hail of bullets. What does that mean? Well, it means that in this case, the Lahit will actually hit on 5 and 6. So it gets a 5+ to hit. unsavable, no need to take cover into the equation, because the Bavarian squad is going to suffer a manpower and casualty if the French unit rolls a 5 or 6. When firing as a battery, let's assume that these two are both normal artillery guns. You would have 2 Lahit guns. Well, you get an additional dice when rolling. So you actually get not only the normal 1d6, you get an additional bonus die for having a battery firing at the Bavarian squad here. So combined artillery units, it's expensive, sure, but it is a really hard way to treat enemy units within firing range, because they do get unsavable casualties straight down the units. You can't do anything about it. So it can turn the game upside down pretty dramatically. Worth mentioning then is when the tables turn and it's time for the Bavarian unit to fire at the French unit. Let's say that the Bavarian squad is now within range from their needle guns, and they can hit the French artillery piece. Well, needle guns 18-inch, 3d6 firepower, 3d6 here. See the French artillery piece here, 1d6 firepower. Oh yeah, we have the battery firepower is also stated right here on the unit card, so that's also worth keeping an eye out for. Defensive value, well, 1d6. So they'll be rolling 1d6, right? And they'll get a firepower of 3 in their face. So in this case, it's a bad day for the Bavarians. Let's say that they actually roll a 6, right? So since they only have a unit strength of 1, they get a 6 morale value for the save, right? So they hit on 6s. You remember that. They hit on 6s on savable hits, right? But they also save on 6s. Oh, the French unit saved the hit. But it's a pretty hard game for the artillery. You don't want to get your artillery within shooting range of enemy rifle fire. You don't want to get your artillery within range of hand-to-hand attacks from the enemy units. They are really vulnerable. They can do a lot of damage, especially if they are in a battery formation, or if you are using, for instance, the French mitrailleurs, a little more aggressive than it was used historically. You can do a lot of damage. So that concludes the example on artillery, and we'll move on to the last example, which is when using heroes. In this last example, we're gonna run a shooting phase between 2 full sections of infantry, 1 full section of French line infantry, 2 squads, 1 full section of Bavarian line infantry, 2 squads. But in this example, the French section would have a hero attached. In this case, Commandant Berbiguier. Let's have a closer look at Berbiguier. We can start out with the model. It's actually sculpted based on a historical painting from the Battle of Gravelotte-Saint-Prévin, called Commandant Berbiguier, where Berbiguier is rallying the French troops. They've been shot to pieces by the onslaught of Prussian, German troops, and the French cavalry and infantry is really suffering a lot during that battle. So Berbiguier has a rallying effect, and that is reflected in his special ability. So a hero works much like a officer, but it costs command points to attach him to a unit. You can attach him to a single squad when you're buying the squad, or you can attach him to a section when you're buying the section. If you have a hero attached, you can't also attach an officer. It can only be one attachment. So the real difference between heroes and officers is that heroes can also be attached just to a single squad. An officer needs a full section to get fielded. But let's have a look at Berbigier. So Berbigier's special ability is called Rally to Me. And it goes like this. Berbigier desperately tried to rally the French infantry at Saint-Privat. As long as Berbigier is on the table, French line infantry will save at a maximum of 5+. So, in this particular example, the French, even if they suffer 2 casualties in the squads will still save at 5+. Now that is perhaps going to tilt the scale for the French unit. Worth noting also is that this special ability of Commandant Berbigier goes for all French line infantry on the table. Not only the squad or the section where he is attached, but all French line infantry, not Zouaves, not the chasseurs, but all the line infantry, they will have this bonus. So if you want to really amp up your defensive ability on your line infantry, Berbigier is a great investment. Perhaps don't field him in a unit that's gonna, get tangled in hand to hand or get a lot of fire. You want to protect your hero a little bit so that the special ability gets a lot of gaming rounds. So let's try and run this example. Each of the French squads will have a defensive role of, we'll give the white to the Germans like we always do, like this. The Germans will fire 3 attack dice each squad, and the French will get 2. So starting again with the Bavarian squad closest to the enemy, gets to fire first. We'll get 1 hit on that roll. And the French squad saves. The second Bavarian squad fires at the same French and gets 3 hits. French having no cover and no extra bonuses, they have the 2 defense die, 4+, and they don't save. So actually in this case, really bad result for the French squad. They actually lose a complete unit in the first round of fire. Now let's say that one of them had survived and it had to take, let's say it took 2 casualties in the first fire from the squads, and the second squad was now firing. Now remember, having the bonus of Commandant Berbigier would give the French a bonus on the save. 2 hits from the Bavarian squad. Normally, being down to a unit strength of 1, the French squad would save on only 6s, but now since they have Berbigier, they save on 5s. So, if it had been a 5, they would have saved both. So Berbigier in that sense can be really strong and tip the scales, right? So both units fired, and it's over to French fire in this case. Only 1 unit left. It's going to direct its fire at the closest unit here, so they get their full strength. So it's 3 dice, 4+, gets 1 hit, 2 defensive die for the Bavarian unit, and it's 4+, and since they're at full strength, snake eye, so they actually lose 1. So over to Bavarian fire. 3 dice here, 3 dice here, and French will have 2. So let's fire this unit first. We're down to unit strength 2. So the first roll here from this squad will have 5+ to hit. Unit strength 3, 4+, unit strength 2, 5+, and unit strength 1, 6+. So 5+ to hit. So here's a good example of how morale can affect fire. It's actually a decent roll normally, but since they already suffered casualty, this roll is not gonna get them anywhere. So over to the second unit within the squad. Remember that since they are, the two squads here are formed as a section, the second squad within the section gets to fire also before the French can answer the fire. So 4+, since they're at full strength, get 2 hits. French at full strength will save at 4+, and they do 2 saves. So over to French fire, and we will have a fire directed at the topmost squad within the Bavarian section. 3 attack dice rolled here. It's a good roll. The French get 3 hits. Bavarian unit has a full 2d6 defensive roll, but since they're down to unit strength 2, they get 5+ to save, and they save 1. So the French unit made 3 hits, 1 was saved, so the Bavarian squad suffers 2 casualties, and it's now gone. So we're down to 1 Bavarian squad left against 1 French squad. Over to Bavarian fire. French squad has 2 defensive dice at 4+ at full strength, and the Bavarian squad has 3 attack dice at 4+ since they're at full strength. They get 1 hit, and the French save. Vice versa, French fire. They create 1 hit. Bavarians don't save. So the Bavarians actually take 1 casualty. Now remember, in this sequence, I'm just conducting the shooting on a rolling sequence between each side. In a normal game, you would have movement, you would have the chance to jump into hand to hand since they're so close as they are here in the example. But now we're not just looking deeply into the dynamics of shooting, so they're going to be static here, just shooting it out. So Bavarian unit shooting, French unit defending, 2 defensive dice, 3 dice for shooting here. They're hitting at 5+ since they're down to unit strength 2. Look at that. 0 hits. Over to French fire. Zero hits again. Rolls are reversed. Bavarian unit fire, and it fires with a great aim this time, has 2 hits. French unit at full strength, 4+ to save, and it doesn't save a single one of them. Things are starting to happen now. We're down to 1 unit strength in the French squad. Bavarian has 2. French fire, 1 unit strength. Now note that the special ability of Commandant Berbeguier does not give you a 5+ to hit, only a 5+ to save. It's a rallying morale bonus. So the French unit will roll 3d6, 6s to hit, and it actually does create a hit. And the Bavarian unit will roll 2d6, 5+ to save, and it saves. So the turn goes back. The Bavarians, they roll a hit. The French unit, now enjoying the rallying capability of Berbeguier, will have a 5+ to save. Normally they would have a 6 only, but now they have 5+ since they are having Berbeguier with them. Oh, they don't save it. So they are wiped out. And that concludes the example of firing, including heroes. So I hope this overall rundown of shooting has given you a fuller and more detailed view how to conduct the shooting, how morale works, how the different units work. If you have any questions, well, ask them in the comments below. We're happy to answer. Also, if you go to the rules section of our website, you will find a free downloadable PDF where there is a step-by-step explanation of how shooting works, section shooting at squad, section shooting at section, squads shooting at section, all the different combinations you can have. So you can have that as a, let's say the first 1 or 2 times you're playing Eagles of Empire Skirmish game, you might have that close to hand, so you'll get the dynamics pretty fast. It's made to be easy, and it's made to be visually decodable with the morale system running as a 3, 2, 1, easy to see what you're gonna roll when you're rolling for a squad or a section. It's always gonna be easy to see what your to hit factor or to save factor is. 4+, 5+, 6+, and so on and so on. So it's pretty straightforward. Plus you always have your these really nicely printed full color unit cards that not only get you information on the cost of recruiting the unit, also movement rate, the rate of your rifle fire, the range of your rifle fire, the rate of it, 3d6, hand-to-hand combat value, defensive value, and your unit strength, which is the morale factor that I just gave you as an example. So using the unit cards will also give you a lot of the information you need to have when playing. So that concludes this example, and I hope you found it informative. I hope you will enjoy playing Eagles of Empire, dipping your toes into the Franco-Prussian War, which is a really fast and changing time in the tactics of warfare. A lot of things happened, and they are all reflected within the rules. We really used a lot of time to research the tactical implications of all the new weapons technology, just like I mentioned the mitrailleurs and so on. So I hope you will enjoy it. I hope you find it interesting, and please add some comments, and we'll see you in the next episode, which is going to deal with hand-to-hand combat. Be well, everybody, and bye-bye.